This morning, I'm not going to I'm not going to go into anything very complicated, and not even this would probably be better if I presented it as a Bible study. But in actual fact, this afternoon we will be going to the book of Revelation. So I needed some time to share this, so I decided to do it now. And I hope that it will be a blessing to us. But let me explain what I'm about to deal with. Many of us here, most of us, are I could refer to us as relics, offshoot, cast-offs from the Seventh-day Adventist Church. As a matter of fact, some of us don't even like to hear the name Seventh-day Adventist, and I don't like to be connected to any church either because most of these messages are going out online, and I don't want people to connect us with something that has ideas that we don't agree with. But for most of us, not everybody, I know there are people here who never had any connections to Adventism, but for most of us, we have that kind of background. A lot of what we are believing today and what we are presenting and sharing still has some connections to Adventism. And from time to time, I will mention it. One of the things that really is very striking to me is that there is a lot in the teachings of the Adventist Church, which I believe has solid connections to the Bible. And when I say this, I want you to understand that every church, I believe every church, not excluding the Roman Catholic Church, I believe every church, Catholic, Jehovah's Witnesses, Pentecostals, I believe that all of them have some elements of truth. So, when I say Adventism has some truth, I'm not meaning in a general way, like everybody believes that we're saved through the death and the life of Christ. But I mean there are some things that are unique. There are some things that are unique to the Seventh-day Adventist movement that nobody else believes. I want to emphasize that. And and yet I believe that these things are solid biblical truth. And when I consider this, it makes me believe that as much as the Seventh-day Adventist movement has gone off into strange paths, I still believe that God used them to do something, or God gave them some very important truth, and we have inherited some of that. Now I'm going to try to illustrate what I'm saying, of course, by using my PowerPoint presentation. And so I'm going to go to my screen here and share. Now, I'm going to allow something. I don't like to do this. People always complain, especially people online who watch the videos. They complain because I allow people to interrupt the service. They say sometimes they are getting something and somebody just interrupts at an odd moment and breaks the trend of thought. And I understand that. Okay, I don't want to open the door, but I want to make sure we understand. So if there is any question, let me emphasize, I would appreciate if nobody interrupts me to make any comments. If there's something that needs clarification, you don't understand what I said, you need clarity, and you can ask your question in a short few sentences, then you can interrupt me, okay? I know that some people have a difficulty in understanding short, and some people have a difficulty in understanding question. I hope you will all give some consideration to what I just said and don't interrupt me unnecessarily. For the sake of those who, I don't mind being interrupted, I don't mind being made to explain things. But I think we need to consider those who will watch the video because people want to understand. All right? So, I'm going to start with I'm going to have two columns on the screen. The column that we are going to be looking at now is going to represent what the Seventh-day Adventist Church believes. As I said, I know some people don't like when we talk about Seventh-day Adventists, but I'm sorry, we're going to be talking about it, and maybe that's not a good reason, but I believe that we can gain something by looking back at what happened in the past. It helps us to better understand where we are in the present and why we understand what we understand. All right? So we're going to be talking about it. So the first thing that Adventists begin with, they begin with what we call cosmic signs. I want you to look at the date. Now, as I'm going through this, I'm going to bear in mind that there are people in this room, like Sister Destiny, who was never an Adventist. And there are others as well who were never Adventists. And some of these things, you might be hearing them for the first time. So I want to make sure that I break things down so you can understand why I'm saying what I'm saying and why we're going where we're going. Now, Adventists believe that their origins, let me say origins, began with these signs. They say there were some signs that happened from the year 1755 until the year 1833. Let me show you what signs they say. Go to the Bible and you look at Revelation chapter 6, and it says, beginning in verse 12, "And I beheld when he had opened the sixth seal, and lo, there was a great earthquake," and they believe that this earthquake took place in the year 1755. This earthquake is known to history as the Lisbon earthquake. There was a great earthquake. Many thousands of people died. It was centered around the city of Lisbon in Portugal, and it was felt over a great portion of the earth. So Adventists believe that this great earthquake was fulfilled, was prophesied here in Revelation chapter 6. The next thing it says, "And the sun became black as sackcloth of hair, and the moon became as blood." Some years later, in 1780, how many years later is that? You have 1755, 65, 75, 25 years later, 25 years later, there was a strange occurrence that took place mostly over North America, where for some reason that is yet not known, nobody can give a good explanation, the sun became dark and the day became like night. It was not worldwide, it was just over North America mostly. In the night when the moon came out, they say it had the appearance of blood. I don't know exactly what that means, but I suppose it had a reddish color about it. That was 1780. Then in 1833, which was what, 53 years later, there was what was called a shower of meteorites, the Leonid call it. There's a group of meteorites that every few decades they come back and visit the Earth. They pass nearby the Earth, and you always have a shower of stars. It's really meteorites falling on the Earth, or meteors, shooting stars. But when it happened in 1833, it was apparently a very spectacular display. Millions of them seemed to be shooting across the sky and falling to the earth. And so the sequence of these events, first there was a great earthquake, then you had the sun to darkness and the moon to blood, and then you had the falling of the stars. Adventists put this together, and they believe that it represented the opening of the sixth seal. They believe that was the opening of the sixth seal. And they believe it was the harbinger or the introduction to the Adventist movement. So that's why Adventists see themselves as a prophetic movement. They see that these signs happened And they were precursors to the setting up of the Advent movement. All right? So here's the thing. You go to verse 14. Verse 13 says, the stars of heaven fell onto the earth. Okay? Verse 14 says, and the heaven departed as a scroll when it is rolled together, and every mountain and island were moved out of their places. Now this follows immediately behind the falling of the stars. The falling of the stars, as Adventists interpret it, happened in 1833. Today is 2024. How long is that? That's 18, 19, 20, 1833, 1933, 20, 23. It's nearly 200 years now. Nearly 200 years. And we still have not seen verse 14. And so Adventists teach and believe that we are living between verse 13 of Revelation 6 and verse 14. We have had the earthquake, we have had the dark day, we have had the moon to blood, we have had the falling of the stars, and then 200 years have passed and we have not yet seen the heaven departing as a scroll. So this is Adventist belief. So they believe these cosmic signs happened between 1755 and 1833. Okay, where do they go next? They believe that the Day of Atonement, and we're not going to look at how they come to this conclusion. We're not going to look at that today. But they believe that the Day of Atonement, spoken of in the Bible, in the book of Leviticus and other places, they believe that it began in 1844. Specifically, they think it started on October 22 in 1844, the Day of Atonement. We may not spend too much time looking at each of these things, right? But if you have a background in Adventism, you will realize that this is exactly what Adventists believe. Okay? If you don't have a background, let me explain what the Day of Atonement is. The Jews had a festival that they observed in the 7th month each year. It was called the Day of Atonement. And it was a day in which the sins of Israel were to be taken away. They got 2 goats, and one goat was offered as a Lord's goat, and the other one was taken away as a scapegoat. And God said, on this day, the priest shall make an atonement for you to cleanse you from all your sins. Now, Adventists believe this began in the year 1844. Because of how they understand some of the prophecies, they come to that conclusion. Well, I don't agree with it, but I'm going to come to that. So, of course, most Christians do not agree with Adventists. I would say almost every Christian, because they say our sins were taken away when Jesus died. And Adventists say this started in 1844. They say Adventists are confused and Adventists are wrong. But the thing is, Adventists agree that Jesus died for our sins in AD 31, 2,000 years ago. But they say the process of dealing with sin was not completed. There's still something left to be done, and that did not begin until 1844. Now, as I said, Adventists are the only people in the world who believe in this doctrine of the end time Day of Atonement. I think I found one group one time, one little obscure group. They don't even have a name, but they were also believing this. But none of the churches that we are familiar with believes in this end time Day of Atonement. It just doesn't exist in their belief structure or in their teaching. All right. The next thing that Adventists believe, they believe that the judgment began at the same time in 1844. And they believe that this judgment began with all the Christians who were dead from the time of Adam, with all of God's people who were dead from the days of Adam, coming right down to the end of time. God has been judging dead people. Now, if you have been participating in our Revelation studies, you know that I believe something similar, but not the same way. Something similar. There's a significant difference. But because we have been looking at the book of Daniel, we realize that the book of Daniel teaches that there is a judgment before Jesus comes again. There's a judgment that is centered in heaven. And all of us, hopefully, should remember this. Anybody who doesn't understand this, I will recommend the videos. I will tell you what videos to watch. So I'm assuming that every one of us understands this. Adventists also believe in a judgment that takes place before Jesus comes again. But again, notice, I want you to take note of the dates, because that is one of the key things that I want you to focus on. Adventists, all of these things, Adventists believe that they took place in the year, or they began long ago, over 200 years ago. They actually believe that the judgment began in 1844. So they see that, they believe that the Day of Atonement and the judgment, they happen at the same time. All right? Now, I hope I'm not leaving anybody behind, but remember, if you are confused about anything, if you need clarity, remember, you can stop me if that is the case. The fourth thing, Adventists believe that the midnight cry also began in 1844, or close, maybe 1845. What is the midnight cry? These days, I'm seeing the midnight cry more and more clearly. The midnight cry is what happens to awaken the virgins. Okay, everybody in this room, we do fall into the category of the sleeping virgins. If you're not among the sleeping virgins, I don't know where you are, because Jesus said that the church would be compared to 10 virgins who took their lamps and they went to meet the bridegroom, and they fell asleep. Wise and foolish fell asleep. If you are not among these virgins, I don't know where you are. It means that you're not part of the kingdom, because the virgins represent the kingdom of God. Now, all of us want to awaken. In my opinion, nobody is yet awake. And in my opinion, nobody will awaken until there is the midnight cry. Okay? There is to be the midnight cry. Now, whether we like it or not, I'm just dealing with plain, straight Bible facts. Jesus, the greatest prophet who ever lived, Jesus says, at midnight there was a cry made, behold, the bridegroom is coming, go you out to meet him. Then the virgins arose and trimmed their lamps. And when the lamps are trimmed, there is a great outburst of light upon this planet. We have not seen that yet, brothers and sisters. If it exists, somebody show it to me. We don't see it. Even if I look wishfully at myself, I can't see it. All right? Now, Adventists say that this midnight cry took place in 1844. And you can understand why they want to believe this, because they are teaching the Day of Atonement, they are teaching the judgment, and so they want to believe that this great awakening took place. You had the beginning of the Advent movement, and they set out to lighten the earth. That's what Adventism believes. All right, let's move on. They believed that round about this period you had the appearance of the remnant church. When they say the remnant church, what are they talking about? They are talking about what we read in Revelation chapter 30, chapter 12. Revelation chapter 12 says, and the dragon was wroth with the woman, and went to make war with the remnant of her seed, which keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus Christ. So, because they have an emphasis on keeping the 10 commandments, and because they believe that Ellen White had the gift of prophecy, they say this verse identifies their church. They keep the commandments of God and they have the testimony of Jesus. And so Adventists refer to their church as the remnant church. And so they say that the remnant church The remnant church appeared during this period. Of course, the church was not organized till a couple of decades later. So after the church was organized, that's when they refer to themselves as the remnant church. And that is where this idea comes from, that the denomination of the Seventh-day Adventist Church is God's special treasure. They refer to themselves as the Israel of God, and they think that they are special above all other Christians on earth. As a matter of fact, there are many of them who believe that the only Christians are the Seventh-day Adventists. Although not every, many believe that there are other Christians in other churches, but they believe that everybody is going to have to become a Seventh-day Adventist in order to be saved. And I know that most of us are familiar with these ideas, but for some of us it may be new. At this point, they believe that you had the flying of the three angels. The three angels' messages, the three angels. Which three angels? Well, again, if we go to the book of Revelation, you will remember that in Revelation 14, it says that there were three angels that were flying in the midst of heaven. And they had the everlasting gospel to preach. Let me go down to that verse, Revelation 14. I saw another angel flying in the midst of heaven, having the everlasting gospel to preach to them that dwell on the earth, every nation, kindred, and tongue, and people. So what we see here is that there is a message that is to go to the entire world, every nation, every kindred, every tongue, and people, and it is said to be the everlasting gospel. You can't get away from this, that this is the fulfillment of Jesus' prophecy. When Jesus says, this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world for a witness to who? All nations, then the end will come. So, Adventists saw themselves as being the agency for fulfilling this. Look at the next verse, and you'll see why. It says that the angel says with a loud voice, fear God and give glory to him. Why? For the hour of his judgment has arrived. The hour of his judgment has come. So if you go back and look at the screen, you will see where they believe that the judgment, look at number 3. They believe that the judgment began in 1844, beginning with dead individuals. And so they believe that they were teaching the message of the judgment, and so they believe that they were giving actually the message of this angel, the first angel, fear God and give glory to him. Then it follows, another angel follows saying that Babylon is fallen, and how they interpreted it was that they believed that all the churches that would not accept their message, they were teaching about the judgment, they were teaching about the Day of Atonement, and they believed that the churches that would not accept these messages made up Babylon. They became Babylon. These churches became Babylon because they rejected the message, and so they believed that all the other churches were fallen, and so they began to preach the judgment, and they began to preach the fall of Babylon, meaning that all the Sunday-keeping churches were fallen and they were Babylon. All right, most of us are familiar with this, but for those who don't know, I'm kind of filling in the gaps for us. Then, number 7, at some point, they believe that the judgment will move on to living individuals. The judgment of the living. Right now they believe, of course, that the judgment of the dead is taking place, okay? God has been judging dead people since 1844, and at some point, he will come to the living people, you and me. And we don't know when it might come to our time and when our name might be called in the judgment. So we have to be very careful, because if our name is called in the judgment and we are not ready, we are probably going to be lost. Not probably, we are definitely going to be lost forever. So this is where they are. The next thing they have on the list is that they believe that the next thing is that the mark of the beast will come. So if you ask me, where are we, or where are Adventists in this frame? I would say that they believe that all of this has already happened. All of this has already happened. And we are down at number 7. Sometime they believe we will have the judgment of living individuals, and they don't know when that will be, and they don't have any idea what that will be about. And then we will have the crisis of the mark of the beast. So right now, I would say they are looking for this mark of the beast crisis. That's the next thing that Adventists are expecting. And that is why if you go to most of the forums, you will see there's a great deal of excitement because they keep talking about the Sunday law. And for those of us who don't know, Adventists believe that the mark of the beast will be a law commanding everybody to keep Sunday holy. So they believe that Sunday worship will be the mark of the beast, but when it becomes a law and everybody is commanded to worship on Sunday, then the mark of the beast will be set up. And so they are looking for this. A lot of them believe that Donald Trump will win the next election, and because Trump is very favorable towards the Christian right in America, those who are those who believe in Christian nationalism, they believe that Donald Trump will be willing to cooperate with them in passing a Sunday law. So they are looking for Trump to win because they think if Trump wins, he will a Sunday law will be rapidly put in place, and then we will see the mark of the beast. That's what they believe. So I think everybody basically understands this. Now I am saying to you, let me clear this off a little bit. I'm saying to you that I believe there are two things on this list that I believe very much. I believe in the end time. No, I don't want that color. I believe that when the Adventists emphasized the Day of Atonement, they were onto something. And when they emphasized the judgment, they were onto something. But I don't agree with everything that they believe. I don't believe that this Day of Atonement began in 1844. And I don't believe the judgment had to do with individuals. And this difference is very important. I probably will try to explain why it is important, but as we proceed, okay? So, where do we go next? Where does Adventism go next? I've put a gap between the mark of the beast and the close of probation. And I'll explain why in a moment. But what we see is that the next thing that Adventists are expecting is this mark of the beast. That's next on their timeline. And after that happens, then there will be persecution in this period. And the preaching will intensify until we come to the close of probation, which is the end of grace. I don't have any space on my screen to put anything else, so I'm going to stop at that point with the Adventist side. Now I'm going to go to the right hand side of the right column. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to look at what I believe and what I've been trying to share over the past weeks and what I believe most of us accept. And I would like us to understand why the difference and why is the difference significant. Now, yeah, I need to put a line there so I can see better what's going on. Now, if you notice, at number one on the left, cosmic signs, on our side, there's no equivalent. Those cosmic signs, that the Lisbon earthquake, the dark day, the Leonid shower, I really don't believe that this was the fulfillment of the prophecy. Okay, when I come to the end, I want to say something about it when I come to the end of my presentation today. But for the time being, I'm just saying that these cosmic signs, I don't believe they were fulfilled back when Adventism believed they were fulfilled. I don't think that These events took place over 200 years. I don't think you can look at the Bible and come to that conclusion. In the Bible, they happen in rapid succession. If I even show you another example of it, if you go to Matthew chapter 24, let's look at another example where it talks about these cosmic signs, and look at what it says. It says in verse 29, immediately after the tribulation of those days shall the sun be darkened, and the moon shall not give her light, and the stars shall fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens shall be shaken. There's no break. All of these happen in one breath. And then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven, and they shall all see and they shall then shall all the tribes of the earth mourn, and they shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. So, if you look at these verses, everything comes in one breath. The sun shall be darkened, and the moon, and the stars, and the powers. Adventists say you have the darkening and the stars falling, and then there's a break. We don't see the powers of the heavens shaken yet. They say we are between those verses, but when you look at the verse, you don't see that gap. Everything happens in rapid succession. So, I'm not beginning, on our side, I'm not beginning with number one. I don't want to say my. I don't want to be self-focused. Maybe I should say my, because I'm assuming that everybody is agreeing with me. I should say we, what we believe, but I'm going to be presumptuous and believe that everybody is in agreement. All right? I'm going to say we. So it's not focused on any one person. So we believe that sometime on the best date that I can give, I'm going to agree with Adventism in terms of the judgment. The best date that I can give is 1844, possibly 1844. But again, it's the judgment, and it's the judgment of the kingdom. Okay. Now, if you look over on the left column, what Adventists believe that it's the judgment of individuals. And here I'm going to say it's the judgment of the kingdom. Now, there's a little bit of overlapping, because when God is judging the kingdom, it involves looking at people, looking at us as individuals. How do we represent the kingdom? But the difference is, look on the left-hand column, the judgment is a threat to our salvation. On the left-hand side, the judgment, the purpose of the judgment is to determine whether you and I can be saved. In other words, according to the Adventist concept of the judgment, your salvation is in jeopardy until after the judgment. What we are understanding based on what we see in Daniel 7, the judgment is not a jeopardy to the salvation of Christians. The judgment is an examination of the kingdom to see whether God's system of government is fit to continue for all eternity. It's an examination of the kingdom. And so, of course, it's examining people. But the issue is not our salvation. It's the justification or the vindication of the government of God through Christ. So, it's a very important difference, because the interpretation on the left leads you to legalism, leads you to a religion of fear, where you're afraid that your name might be called and you're not ready. You're constantly laboring to try to be ready. You're working to save yourself so that in the judgment you're okay. Over on the right, we are still involved. We are still vigorously laboring, but it's not to save ourselves. It's for the glory of our God and for the permanent vindication of his kingdom. So there's a difference. We are not in jeopardy, and it makes a big difference. Now, I believe that this started, as I said, probably in the year 1844. How do we come to the year 1844? It's because of the prophecy in Daniel chapter 8, and verse 14. That prophecy says that after 2,300 days, the sanctuary would be restored. Um, Adventists believe that it says the sanctuary would be cleansed. And that's why they tied it to the Day of Atonement. I don't like to try to write with this thing. It's impossible. Let me just abandon that. They believe that the sanctuary would be cleansed, and I believe that the proper translation should be the sanctuary will be restored. Restoration of truth so God can perfect his kingdom. I won't go into that in detail now. But anyway, so the best time I can see is 1844. But then all the things that they have here, all the things that they have here as having happened already. Remember, they believe that all these things are done and dusted. They are already in the past. Because of this, Adventists like to refer to themselves as historicists. They look at prophecy as history in the past. And people who believe that these prophecies are in the future, they call them futurists. Now, most of the other churches who happen to look at Revelation, they tend to be futurists, but their concept of it is far different, far different. They believe that Revelation will be fulfilled after the church is raptured away to heaven. The church will be gone, all of us will be gone, and then afterwards, now you're going to have 7 years tribulation when the Antichrist will come and when the Jews will once again be God's special people. And they believe that this is what Revelation is talking about. So they are referred to as futurists. And then you have some people who they have a little bit of historical, and they have a little bit of the future, and they give them a name, preterists. Now you can burn all those theological terms, right? Because I don't even know which category they would put us in, but I know that I believe that most of these prophecies are still future. But I'm not a futurist like they would tie in those rapture believing people. And I'm not a historicist like Adventists think everything is in history. So I don't know what label we would get, but I hope whatever we believe, it's based on the Bible. So Adventists believe that all of these things are already past, gone. Some of them are continuing, like they believe that the Day of Atonement is still going on, the judgment of the dead is still going on, the remnant church is still in existence, the 3 angels are still flying, but they think all these things are already fulfilled. We don't believe, I don't believe that any of these have happened yet, apart from that the judgment probably started. The judgment started with the kingdom that is already past. So where do we find ourselves linking up or coinciding with Adventist belief? The next thing I have on this screen, the mark of the beast. When the mark of the beast comes, we and Adventists will be in the same place. But Adventists believe it will be a Sunday law. Maybe some of us here believe that as well. I'm not going to argue or cut you down if you believe this, but you should know that I don't believe this anymore. I don't believe that the mark of the beast will be a Sunday law. And if you ask me what it will be, I won't give you a definite answer. Some other time I might give you some suggestion, but not now. But the thing is that both of us agree that the mark of the beast is just ahead of us, right before us. They might interpret it one way, and we might interpret it another way, but we all agree that it is right ahead of us. The truth is that the mark of the beast might come, and they don't recognize it because they are looking somewhere else. But anyway, we coincide on this. We all believe that it's the next thing that we can see on the prophetic timeline. So if you are following closely, you will recognize that if this is true, then all of these, we don't believe that they have taken place yet. Adventists believe that all of these have already happened, and I don't have it. I only have one of them on my list. So that means that all of these things we should still put them in the future. And that's exactly how it is. So we believe that the mark of the beast is ahead of us. When the mark of the beast comes, then it will be the judgment of the living. Those who, and it's not the judgment of the living individuals again, it's not jeopardy to individuals. It's the judgment of the living kingdom. Okay? So it's a kingdom that is being judged, but it's a kingdom that is alive. We are going to be put, the kingdom of God is going to be put in a fire, and the fire is going to judge and determine what kind of kingdom has Christ being preparing. What kind of kingdom has Christ's government produced? It will come to the living, which is you and me. So when does this happen? It happens when the mark of the beast is set up. As a matter of fact, the mark of the beast is the event that will judge the whole world, according to Revelation 3 and verse 10. So while they see this as happening way up here in 1844, we believe that this is still ahead of us. All right, so we don't, that is where we differ from Adventist teaching. We believe in a pre-Advent judgment, but they think it is past, while we think it is still. I see your brother Joel. I see your brother Joel. I see your brother Joel. It's still in the near future. Brother Joel, go ahead and ask your question.
That was an accident. I apologize.
Okay, all right. Um, so of course, they say the midnight cry occurred. This is one of the most obvious things that you can look at and say it doesn't make sense. The midnight cry, Jesus says, when the midnight cry takes place, the bridegroom is coming, go out to meet him, then all the virgins arise and trim their lamps. Where is the trimming of the lamps? They say it happened in 1844. In 1844, the Great Revival took place. Where is that? This is clearly that Adventism got the basic ideas right, but they were confused about the details. I want to say that I think, and you know that I believe this, I believe that Adventists were very right about the Day of Atonement and the judgment. They were very right about it. Something happened. God gave them some insight. I believe they stumbled around in the dark a bit and they kind of stumbled upon some of these truths. But it's the truth. You can't go to the Bible. Anybody believes that I am defending Adventism, or anybody believes that what I'm saying is unscriptural, I would challenge you to come to me with the Bible, whether privately or publicly, and I can show you clearly that the Day of Atonement is at the end of time, and that the judgment, there's a pre-Advent judgment, there's a judgment before Jesus comes again to determine the destiny of the two kingdoms. This is not Adventism, this is Bible teaching. But somehow it became a part of the the teachings of the Advent movement, distorted with a wrong emphasis, with a wrong focus. But the kernel of the truth is there. And this is one of the reasons why I can't help believing that God was trying to do something with Adventism. But they got sidetracked, they got diverted because they never gave up their emphasis on the law. The whole structure has been legalistic. Sister Talia, I'll get to you in a moment. The whole structure has been legalistic, and the judgment concept has been couched in the language and the setting of legalism. And it is because they never got away from putting the law at the center when Christ should be the center. Go ahead with the question, Sister Talia.
Thank you, Brother David. I'm saying, I'm crystal clear. You refer to the Advent.
I can hardly hear you. Can hardly hear you.
When you refer, can you hear me now?
Sure.
Very good. When you refer, so I'm crystal clear. When you refer to the Adventist, are you talking about the Advent, Seventh Day Adventist movement, or the Adventist of the Christian world?
Well, of
Are you
course, I'm
talking
talking
about?
about Of course, I'm talking about the Seventh-day Adventist movement. I'm talking about what started in 1844.
Thank you.
Okay, all right. So, what is it that causes the midnight cry? Notice I have on the right panel, I believe that the midnight cry is ahead of us. What is it that causes the midnight cry? Jesus says that everybody is sleeping, but he says something is to happen to awaken the church. When I compare the prophecies, what do you think will electrify and wake up the church? Brothers and sisters, I believe it is when the mark of the beast, when we see the mark of the beast, when that is established, then you're going to see Christians wake up. I challenge you, and I'm making this challenge because I have experience of trying for 40 something years. I challenge anybody to awaken the Christian world before the midnight cry. I challenge anybody to break the words of Jesus and to make the words of Jesus false. Waken the church before the midnight cry. Let me see somebody do it. It's not possible because the words of Christ are infallible. There is to be an awakening at the midnight cry, and the earth is to be lightened with the glory of what happens. This marks the judgment of the living kingdom. But the kingdom will be prepared for it because the kingdom will be awakened. This is what we see ahead. The thing is, the Seventh-day Adventist movement put these things in the past. When they started in 1844, they believed this was the end of the world. They had the best of intention, but they never went on to see where they made their mistakes. They believed it was the end of the world because, of course, they believed that Jesus was coming in 1844. They believed that the judgment began in 1844. Of course, you would believe it's the end of the world. So they believe that they were the remnant church, and they believe that the three angels' messages began. But if you look at Revelation, the three angels' messages come after the mark of the beast is set up. Revelation 13, the mark of the beast is set up. Revelation 14, the three angels fly. Adventists were like 200 years before the time. And I'm saying I don't I don't condemn Adventism, and I don't dump Adventism, because I believe God was trying to do something through the movement, and he laid a foundation. He laid a foundation that I still benefit from today. But I have great problems when people sit down with the thing that was erroneous. They sit down in the same position in the past when it is so clear that there were mistakes being made. People talk about historical Adventists, and they act like it's infallible because there was some good in it at the beginning. No, no. There was a lot of good, and there was a lot of mistakes that were made, errors that were made. We live in the light of what God says would be, many shall run to and fro through the prophecies, and knowledge shall be increased. And in the light of increasing knowledge, why sit down with things that are patently mistakes? Why? Because people want to be loyal to a system, and they're not walking forward in the light that the Lord opens before us.
May I ask a question, David? We move on.
Yes, yes, Wayne, go ahead.
So therefore, then, if I want to understand you correctly, therefore, then, when the mark of the beast is introduced and the virgins are awakened, wise and foolish, it's not so much. Is it so much for proclamation or creating, causing repentance of individuals, or is it just a matter of separating the sheep from the goat, so to speak?
Okay, there are two emphases at the midnight cry. There are two emphases. Number one, there is a message for Christians. It's very clear because at the midnight cry, notice the next thing I have on the list is that the three angels fly. Remember, the second angel's message is what? Babylon is fallen. And when Babylon is fallen, what is the message? The message is, come out of her, my people. So there's a message for Christians to get out of the denominations. When Babylon, when the second, why get out of the denominations? Because the mark of the beast has been set up, and the mark of the beast has entered the denominations. The churches have accepted the mark of the beast, and that is why God's people, the remnant, which appears at this time, is telling those in Babylon, God's people, to get out of Babylon. So there's a message for the churches. This is the time when the foolish virgins find that there's no oil in their lamps. But there's also a message for the world. There's a combination of two things: the church to come out of Babylon, and then there's a third message which says, if any man worship the beast and his image. So it's a complete message. Those who already have an understanding of the truth will be the first in proclaiming the truth. They will be able to share the light with others who are just coming to understand, both within Christendom and outside of Christendom. But of course, there are many within Christendom who will embrace the message and become a part of that remnant. Okay, and I believe, just everybody believes, but just to emphasize that this remnant is not to be a denomination. It's to be people who follow the Lamb wherever he goes, and they don't follow men, and they don't follow denominations, and they're not institutionalized, nor living after the pattern of human organization. That's why God can keep them safe when every organization is bowing to the beast. As we have said, organizations must bow to the beast. You cannot be an organization in the time of the mark of the beast. Every institution receives its authorization from the government. The government produces the mark of the beast, and you remain as an institution and you're not going to receive it. And every man must receive it, or else he cannot buy or sell. How can you survive? The institutions will bow, and God's people will know they must get out of Babylon. The message is to be crystal clear. Brother Tony, go ahead. I think Brother Tony wanted to ask a question. Somebody named T, could be somebody else, said, can I ask a question? You can go ahead.
While you're waiting for that person, David. So because then this is where you say they're not defiled by women then, based on the point you just
I,
made.
I believe I believe that's what it means when it says they're not defiled by women. I think women refer to other religious institutions. Yes, I believe that that's what that means. All right, Brother Tony, I'm not sure who that T was that wanted to.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I'm
Okay.
ready. Concerning the mark of the beast, I know in Adventism they believe that Sunday worship, when it's fully mandated on everyone, that's the mark of the beast. But um, have you ever considered that the Trinity has something to do with the mark of the beast?
Um, it could, Brother Tony. It could, and I've heard the idea promoted in different places. The thing is, I'm skeptical, and here's the reason why I'm skeptical. The Trinity is a Christian. It's a Christian conversation. The only people who care about whether God is a Trinity or not are people who are Christians. It's not an issue for the world. I tend to believe that the mark of the beast is going to be something that will the people in the world are going to recognize it is something wrong, as well as the people within Christendom. This is a belief I have about the mark of the beast, because if it is going to test everybody who lives on the earth, it cannot be just for Christians. So while I understand the abominable idea of the Trinity, how bad it is, and while it is related to every other truth, I don't believe that in itself it has to do with the mark of the beast. And I think, the people who suggest it, it's because they are so strongly focused on the one God message that they are doing almost anything to promote it. But if I'm going to promote it, I want to promote it in a way that I see legitimate. I don't want to just invent things, and I think that's what happens sometimes. Um,
Might be the
so
best time.
what's that, Brother Joe?
Might be the best time to ask so as to not break it out at a later time that you can get to speak. Um, you just said a while ago before you took on the questions that those that have now left the church are wouldn't be able to buy or sell unless they had the mark of the beast. I don't think you would understand that as being literal there. What is your understanding of what it means there to not be able to buy and sell?
That's a good question. I mean, is it literal or not literal? I don't want to answer because I've never given that question careful thought. I understand the reason for the question. The fact that so many things in Revelation are figurative,
Yes.
the thought is, why would this be literal? And I don't have a good answer to the question, so I'm not going to attempt to answer it at the moment. But one thing I know is that, at the very least, what we can know is that there's going to be great trauma for those who don't have the mark of the beast. So whether it's literal buying or selling or something else, the whole idea is that they are going to be subjects of great persecution. The world will try to destroy them. I think we can agree on that. So maybe some other time we can consider the question itself, but I would want to take more time to look at it closely.
Thank you.
Okay, Brother Joel. So the next thing that we have on the list is that the remnant of Christ appears. If you look at all that we have on the screen so far, you will see that all of these are basically, they are simultaneous events. Okay, they're all taking place after the mark of the beast is established. So the great catalyst, the great awakener, the great driving force behind the great last revival is actually Satan's attempt to destroy God's people. All right. Now, when most of us will remember the COVID, the COVID crisis. The COVID crisis was an awakening to us because it was an indicator of how rapidly the world could be brought to the place, almost the entire planet could be brought to the place where it becomes stratified into two clear classes of people, and where it was as easy as snapping your fingers to persecute one group and to justify the other group. In a moment, in a fraction of a moment, it happened, and we saw how quickly the powers that be could bring the entire planet under their domination. It was absolutely, I don't believe it's the mark of the beast, but I believe it had lessons to teach us. So we see that the mark of the beast will be the catalyst to bring about great changes, and these changes will bring about the situation that will judge the living kingdom, that will cause the midnight cry, the great awakening cry among God's people. It will give the three angels the authority to fly with great power. And then the remnant of Christ will appear, because they'll be coming out of Babylon. They'll be separate and distinct from the rest of the world. So then you'll finally begin to see the church of Christ. You can't see it today. As much as we would like to think so, it's not this fellowship. We just hope that we will be a part of that remnant when it appears, being faithful to the Lord. And so, at the end of this process, this great trial, which I believe will last for 3.5 years, there will be the Day of Atonement. There will be when the sins are blotted out of the minds and the experience. The memory of sin will be blotted out of the experience of God's people. And the sealing is a process that will take place right along during the entire process. Sister Talia, you want to say something?
Yes. Based on what you have spoken, what I
Your
would
audio is your audio is
back
bad
here
again.
amazing like us.
Your audio,
I said,
audio. Yeah.
can you hear me now?
Yes, much better.
I'm sorry about that. Um, so when you say about the day, speak about the Day of Atonement and the sealing, um, I want to understand to your summation of what Christ is doing right now in mediating before God for the people on this, his people on this earth. So, am I to understand that um, he is atoning for the sins of whom? So I'm clear, and because you just stated that thereafter, or these fundamentals or these points are done, that's when atonement, and sealing will happen. So my question is, so from 1844, who was being made atonement for? And in my teaching, what I was taught was that there was a sealing being taking place rather. And I hope I expressed that correctly because I
Sure,
don't know
I
how.
understand. I
In a sense,
understand. I understand. I grew up in Adventism and I understand perfectly the Adventist perspective, Sister Talia. Now, what I've highlighted on the left, this is Adventist belief that the Day of Atonement began in 1844 and it continues right down until the close of probation, right? Which is, and it has been going on for over 200 years. Okay, so what I'm presenting is that the Day of Atonement is not a long, drawn out process. I don't believe it began in 1844 and it goes down until the close of probation. No, and I'll tell you why I don't believe it. I believe that the Day of Atonement takes place on a certain short time period, could be one day down at the end of time. Why do I believe this? Let me explain very quickly because it may take longer than a few moments to explain it. But let me mention something that I know you will be aware of. In the type, how long was the day of Pentecost? It was one day. How long was it fulfilled? It was one day. In the type, how long was the Passover? It was one day. How long did it take to fulfill? It was one day. In the type, how long was the Day of Atonement? It was one day. How long should it take to fulfill? It should be one day. According to the Adventist teaching on the left, it has been nearly 200 years it has been going on. It does not make sense if you try to fit it to the type because the type, it was one day. Why would it take 200 years? And if you even look at the Adventist interpretation of the blowing of trumpets, that was supposed to be 10 years, 10 days. Adventists say one day represents a year. So they said the blowing of trumpets began in 1833 with the preaching of William Miller. And it went on until 1843. It took 10 years. So they give one day for 1 year. If you do this for the trumpets, then you should do the same for the Day of Atonement. The Day of Atonement should be 1 year. So it should have been the year 1844 or until 1844 or 45. Then the Day of Atonement should have ended. But no, according to Adventists, it started in 1844 and it has been going on for nearly 200 years and it's still not over. It does not fit the type. They made a mistake when they said that it began in 1844. I believe the judgment of the kingdom, the past, could have started at that time, but the Day of Atonement is the end of the process. At the end of the judgment, you have the Day of Atonement because the Day of Atonement is when God's people are clean of all their sins. Nobody has been cleansed of all their sins from 1844 until today. Not even Ellen White or any of the Adventist pioneers. None of them was clean of all their sins. They all died with their sins. They all died with the memories of sin. It only happens to the last generation, to the 144,000. So the Day of Atonement has not taken place yet. And I don't agree with the Adventist teaching that it started in 1844. I agree that it's an end time event. I agree. You can't look at the feast and come to another conclusion. But I think they started 200 years too early. That's why. That's why our perspective is not the same and we cannot follow simply the pattern that the Adventists have laid down.
Brother David, just a quick question. Sorry.
Sure, sure.
So the Day of Atonement goes for the dead as well as for the living, right? I mean,
Yes,
when it happened. I just want some clarification on that.
you remember when you look at Revelation, you see that the souls under the altar, they are given white robes. So
Yes.
this happens while they are dead. But what is the atonement experience? The atonement experience is where every relic of the sin life is taken away. And what we have come to understand is that it has to do with even removing the memories of sin from a person's mind, so that your mind is completely, inwardly, you are completely clear of sin. Today, we have been justified by Christ. Today, we have Christ living in us. But those memories of sin, they are still there, and they are still they still present hooks that Satan can use to drag us back into sin. These are to be taken away in the day of atonement, and that has not happened yet. Even the dead people cannot experience it until in the resurrection, because they are dead. They don't have any experience to say sin has been taken away. It's in the resurrection, when they come from the grave, that they experience this new life that is completely free from every relic of sin. So it's the living people, the 144,000, who are the first people who experience this day of atonement. And maybe that's one reason why they are said to be the first fruits unto God and to the Lamb. They're the first part of the human race that enter this state of the fullness of what the atonement means. So,
I have to follow up.
Sister Talia, okay, all right. I don't want to be interrupted too much, so that the flow is broken. But if it's a quick question, go ahead. Then I'll let the rest of them wait till afterwards.
I'll wait.
All right, okay. We'll take it at the end, because I'm conscious that people are going to be saying they haven't been able to follow because there was so much interruption. I don't mean any harm, but I think of the people who will be watching online. So the next thing that happens now, after the Day of Atonement, you come to the cosmic signs. This is when you have the falling of the stars, you have the dark day, the moon turns to blood, and the stars fall from heaven. That's what we see in Revelation chapter 6. These signs mark the end of grace. The next thing that happens is that there's a close of probation. Okay? So, the difference, as I've pointed out, the difference that I've tried to point out is that Adventists see all of these things as being in the past. They jumped ahead of prophecy by 200 years, while in my understanding, let me say my, maybe I should say our, but let me say my, in my understanding, these things are still in the future. And when we go to the book of Revelation, I think you can see clearly why part 2 on the right is very much in harmony with what we see in Revelation, while part 1, there's so much in part 1 that needs to be adjusted. So this is why many of the teachings of Seventh-day Adventism, we have had to abandon them, even though we cannot say that we completely divorce every idea. As I said, there are these two things that Adventists hold to, that I believe it has to be the Spirit of God that was leading them when they came to see the Day of Atonement as an end time event, and they came to see that there's a pre-Advent judgment. So, I wanted to do this today, and it's kind of like, I know it's been a sort of a mechanical kind of study, but I hope that we have been able to find some kind of value in it. I believe that we can best understand our position in history when we can put ourselves in some kind of context. Where are we? Who are we? We're Adventist offshoots, we're breakaway, we're an independent group, we have nothing to do with Adventism. Who are we? And where are we? And why are we here? I think if we can find our context, which is what I'm trying to do, we have a better idea of why we stand where we stand and exactly where we are standing. Hopefully, from this point, we have a clearer idea of where we stand in the stream of time. And that's what I wanted to get across, brothers and sisters.